This is why you're struggling to get a software engineering job. It's not because you're not smart enough, and it's not because you haven't grinded enough LeetCode problems. Well, maybe that could be it. There is a process to landing that coveted role that we all desire. And honestly, it doesn't help that most of the media only covers success stories. Today, we'll be talking about what you're doing wrong and how you can adjust your luck to land your dream software engineering role. First thing is, work smart, not hard. There's a famous quote by Bill Gates where he says, "I choose a lazy person to do a hard job, because a lazy person will find an easy way to get it done." Now, I'm specifically referring to the application process here. The traditional way of landing an interview is to apply through an online application. You sit at your computer, upload your resume, and then, lo and behold, you're asked to manually fill out all of the information that you already had on your resume. Then you submit your application and do the whole thing all over again, and again, and again. That's a lot of work, especially if you're a new grad who's looking for an entry-level job. And then what? You wait for months to get an answer, and most times those companies just end up ghosting you anyways. Well, I guess you can't get ghosted if you were never in contact with them in the first place. So unless you're like Brad, who went to MIT, got a 4.0 GPA, and was the president of the robotics team, don't just bulk apply online. It takes way too much time, and there does come a point of diminishing returns. Instead of relying on the online application system, I would spend time finding openings for your role online, checking to see that you hit about 25 to 40% of the requirements. Remember, skills can be taught after all. And then cold messaging your victims, or those lucky people on LinkedIn. Now, I want to emphasize this as much as possible. Do not randomly message as many people as possible on LinkedIn that work at X company. You want to take a very deliberate approach here. Instead, target your DMs towards software engineering recruiters. These are recruiters that are specifically hiring people like you. You can also focus on hiring managers. After a bit of research, you can sometimes figure out who the hiring manager is for the role that you're applying to. And lastly, it also helps to message other engineers on the team, or just other engineers within the company. And don't forget to make it really easy for them to help you. Ask them about their role and try to set up an informational interview or a Q&A with them if possible. Even offer to send them the link for the role or the job ID so they have a reference to the role that you are applying to. And here's the kicker. If they don't respond, that's okay. Just shoot them another message or email a week later. And if they still don't respond, that's also okay. Just find a different recruiter or engineer. I get DMs on LinkedIn all the time where people ask me for help or guidance in their careers, but I can't guide you unless you guide me. Tell me exactly what role you're applying for and do an honest assessment of what you bring to the table. Chances are these people are getting several DMs every day, so you really want to stand out in front of the crowd. An example of a cold message could be, "Hi blank, I noticed that you have blank years of experience at blank company and thought you would be a great person to reach out to in order to learn more about your time at company X. I'm currently in the market for a software engineering role, and I have applied to the following positions. Insert job ID or link here. I love the company's mission statement, and it would be great to connect over a call to chat more. I can set up some time next week if that works for you." This gives the person the impression that you've done your research, you're interested in their experience, and you want to learn from them. You've also made it easy for them to say yes by offering to set up time on their behalf and also by sending them the link to the job description. Easy, right? Quality is way more important than quantity in this case, and if you play your cards right, you could be looking at a new job interview. Moving on to the next reason that you're struggling to get that software engineering position is grit. I know most of you are probably really gritty, and no, I don't mean grits, I mean passion and perseverance in the face of adversity. This term was coined by Angela Duckworth, a famous social psychologist who believed that perseverance was a bigger factor for success rather than intellect. So let that sink in for a second. On average, working harder is better than working smarter. Well, not quite. All it means is that you increase your odds of success the more you persist whenever something goes wrong. Say you're interviewing at a company and you don't pass the interview. Well, keep the line of communication open with the recruiter so that you can apply again in the future. Never ever close a door with a company because they've rejected you. There are plenty of times where people have gone to a company after failing once or twice. Sometimes it's just a rite of passage before joining said company. But to be honest, rejection is hard. Failing is hard. You've worked countless hours to study, you're exhausted, the competition is really high, I get it. Grit isn't easy, and I'm not saying to work yourself to the point where your mental health gets affected. Having stability in your mind is way more important than having stability in your wallet a lot of times. but be consistent with your persistence. If that means studying for LeetCode 20 minutes a day, then do that, but do it every day. That's not a huge commitment, and I'm sure you'll eventually find a rhythm that works for you. Getting the job is the hardest part. Once you get the job, it's a lot easier to make mistakes and learn while you're progressing in your career. Unfortunately, you don't always get the same grace during the interviewing process, which is why it's vital at this point to be as gritty as possible. The next reason that it's such a struggle to get a software engineering job is because of where you're aiming. This is a trap I fell into as well. We all want to go to the best schools, work at the best companies, and enjoy the perks of big tech. But in reality, not a lot of people work there, nor should a lot of people work there. Sure, Facebook, Google, Amazon, they're all great companies. They also have some of the best engineers working there, but so do a lot of other companies. About preference at the end of the day and choosing what works for you. Now, I know that sounds very cliche. Of course you want to work at a company that values you, but what about all of the free food and insane compensation packages at those FAANG companies? Well, if that's the most important thing to you, then more power to you when you're applying for those roles. But for me, after working at a startup, mid to large company, and larger big tech company, the most important factors I found are your relationship with your manager, coworkers, and the flexibility. That's it. Not salary, not technology, and not even free food. Now, before you start angrily typing in the comments about how wrong I am about what a person should value in a company, let me explain. This goes back to the whole DMing strangers on LinkedIn to ask them to chat about their jobs. Human connection and cooperation can move mountains. If you have a good relationship with your manager, then you can ask to work on the shinier tech, collaborate with other teams, or even take on more responsibility. They control your promotions and raises, and they're your biggest advocates when it comes to asking for favors. When you have a good relationship with your coworkers, it just makes life on the team a whole lot more enjoyable. Work is no longer something you have to do each day, but something you get to do. Also, whenever things go wrong, whether it's your fault or theirs, you'll have each other's backs when it comes time to mitigate the incident. My point is, apply to smaller and mid-sized companies too. If you're honest about your mindset and willingness to learn, you're qualified to work at those companies. Use it as a stepping stone to gain more experience. I did that as well. You don't have to rush into life at a big tech company. It's not the only thing out there for you. And guess what? You also won't need to grind LeetCode for months before getting into those smaller companies. Be picky, but not that picky when it comes to choosing your first job. And once you finally do land that first job, the next job becomes a whole lot easier. Prioritize those values and the learning will follow. Those first steps are always the hardest, and it can be difficult to land a software engineering role without proper guidance. I'm hoping these tips help you get out of the rut of endlessly applying for jobs and help you finally land your dream job.